Good morning, folks. Everything new under the sun. Happy New Year to you. It is December 31st, 2018, the last day of 2018, and it's been an incredible year, prophetically. I think I'll argue what we saw is the ramp up in birth pains, prophetic birth pains. They increase in frequency and intensity with tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanoes erupting Krakatoa, which caused the Indonesian tsunami. And we've seen all sorts of things economically happening, which have to happen, which are referred to, which are kind of written between the lines in end-time Bible prophecy as it relates to the mark of the beast system and the one world government and the new fiat currency that will be in place since the mark of the beast will be enforced. And with that comes the entry of the new year and a rabbi warning about the super blood moon, and it's going to be a sign for the Americas, apparently. And we also have experts warning of significantly increased earthquakes and volcano eruptions coming to you in 2019. Let's take a look at a couple of things. First, let's start off with scriptures here. This is from BibleGateway.com, Matthew 24. And Matthew 24 speaks of earthquakes. Earthquake. Verse 7, for nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in diverse places. I just sneezed there, excuse me. So that's Matthew 24, verse 7. There's earthquakes in diverse places. Now we move over to Luke 21, and it says a similar thing, 21 verse 11. And great earthquakes shall be in diverse places, and famines and pestilences. What do we have with pestilences? Well, we have Ebola. We have people with Ebola coming to the United States for treatment. Ebola patients have escaped the hospitals that they were in Africa because the hospitals were overrun with protesters. And so great signs all over the place, fearful sights, men's hearts failing them for fear of things coming upon them. So we have Matthew 24, Luke 21 speaking to these things. And so I want to take a look at what this rabbi says about the supermoon. And of course we know the supermoon causes earthquakes, can cause earthquakes. If you've followed BP Earth Watch for any length of time, you'll know that. And also controls the tides, obviously. So when the moon is the closest, that's when there's kind of maximum gravitational pull on the Earth. And so you would expect some earthquakes to be correlated to it, some events, some earthly events, weather or otherwise connected to it. So let's see briefly what this says. Israeli mystical rabbi, first super blood moon of the year, sign of earthquakes and governments will fall. This is interesting because my second video today is going to be about Israel and Netanyahu's apparent last term. I think it's a prophetic declaration by Shakid, the minister in Israel. We're going to take a look at that in the second video, so stay tuned for that. But I think some inadvertent prophetic words coming out of Israeli ministers about Netanyahu's last term in office as it relates to the 70 shepherds of Israel. On the evening of January 21st, as the holiday of Shavuot begins, a lunar eclipse will pass over Washington, D.C., just as the president will reach the halfway point of his term in office. The eclipse will be a super blood moon, described in Jewish sources as having powerful significance. So normally, blood moons and the moons are generally an omen for Israel, but this rabbi is relating it to an omen, a bad omen for that matter, for the United States and North America generally. And generally, the sun, when there's eclipses and such, these are bad omens for Western nations. But we'll see what he says about this. It says, on the Gregorian calendar, the lunar eclipse will be visible in its entirety from North and South America, as well as portions of Western Europe and Northwest Africa. On the evening of Sunday, January 20th, and in the early morning hours, Monday, January 21st, the evening of the eclipse will be a supermoon when the moon is at its perigee, the point in its month-long elliptical orbit that brings it closest to the Earth. At that time, the moon appears to be 14% bigger and 30% brighter than at its apogee, its furthest point from the Earth. Note that this will not only be the first lunar eclipse of 2019, but also the year's first supermoon. At that time, the proper conditions will exist to create a blood moon in which the moon has a distinctly reddish tint. This will be the last lunar eclipse until March 26th, 2021. And that's, of course, an interesting year because I think that's the start of the 7-year tribulation, 2021. On the political calendar, this article goes on to say, it's the halfway point for Donald Trump, coming exactly 2 years after he was sworn in as the 45th president. It should be noted that Trump was born on the night of June 14, 1946, within 15 minutes, apparently, of a total lunar eclipse and 700 days, all significant, interesting numbers, before the State of Israel was established. Trump's lucky sevens not in there. When he was sworn in as president on January 20, 2017, he was 70 years old, 7 months, and 7 days. So on the Jewish calendar, the holiday of Tu Shavat, the 15th day of the Hebrew month of Shavat, begins at sundown on the same day, known as the New Year of the Trees. Tu Shavat is one of the 4 New Years mentioned in the Mishnah. The Orlah, a lunar eclipse in the month of Shavat, is a sign of the rise of aspect of judgment. Look at that, judgment in the world. Rabbi Ganit told Breaking Israel News, the eclipse will rule over Americas, but for Israel, it will bring chesed, or loving kindness. So this mystic rabbi believes it's a sign of judgment upon the world, and I think this basically warns prior to of judgment. And look at this, judgment expressed. Rabbi Ganut describes specifically how the judgment will be expressed, and this is very interesting. There will be a marked increase in earthquakes and volcanoes. We're going to take a look at an article where experts warn there's hundreds of volcanoes and earthquakes ready to go. It says, even more than we have seen in the past year, Rabbi Ganuth, just as the eclipse is a conflict between the sun and the moon, to rule over the heavens, there will be a similar conflict on earth. This will begin a time when governments are in balance. Some governments that seem powerful right now will fall, United States, and others will rise in their place. So look at this one. This is express.co.uk. Experts warns of 100 massive volcanoes on the cusp of eruption, but no one knows which first. 2019 is going to be a huge year prophetically. I think it's the year that the United States really starts going downwards. I think it's the year when the earth starts rumbling significantly. Birth pains are increased. One of the world's foremost volcanologists has warned that there are around 100 explosive volcanoes around the world that could cause devastation at a moment's notice. It says, a further caveat is that no one can be sure which will blow first. Professor Stephen Sparks of the University of Bristol said, and he was discussing which volcano is currently the deadliest, but he couldn't settle on one. Of course, we have Krakatoa, Anak, the little brother of the main Krakatoa volcano, as I understand it. It went off, it caused a landslide, and it caused the tsunami, which killed 450 people in Indonesia. If we're talking about very large eruptions that could have global impact, they don't have to be super eruptions to have big effects on the surroundings, like climate and atmosphere. Ash from volcanoes, for example, could cause significant global cooling or even a mini ice age. It's happened in the past where a volcano has went off and effectively caused a mini ice age because the sun is blocked out for a couple of years until the ash dissipates. Nothing much will be happening, so they're quite hard to spot. Some colleagues of mine looked around the world's volcanoes. They identified those volcanoes that had the possibility or the right characteristic for having a big explosive eruption, and they have identified 100 of them. There are some in Africa, Turkey, Japan, Indonesia, South America, Central America. There's quite a lot of them, but we don't really yet have the science to suggest which of the 100 or more is more likely than the other. And of course, this comes as one such volcano, Anak Krakatoa, has unleashed devastation in Indonesia, which lies in the Pacific Ring of Fire. So once the Pacific Ring of Fire volcanoes start going around, they're all connected to each other, and so they will all start going around. All start erupting, effectively. On the 22nd of December, a vast eruption caused a tsunami that hit Sumatra and Java, where more than 420 people died and 40,000 were displaced. The mountain is said to have lost 3/4 of its size in the immense eruption. The crater peak was brought down from 338 meters to just 110. So that's one volcano that kind of kicked off probably 2019, and at the end of 2018. So we have Matthew, book of Matthew, describing a situation where there will be earthquakes in diverse places. We have Luke 21 describing earthquakes in diverse places. We have a mystic rabbi saying that this 2019 will be the year of earthquakes and governments falling. I think it will be earthquakes and economic collapse. And I think if it's not complete and total economic collapse, it will be known as the start of the economic collapse. If November, December won't be noted, for 2018, what we just went through, that may be later known as kind of the start, the initial indicators of the economic crisis to come. I believe that's what's happening. And then we have experts saying there's over 100 volcanoes that are ready to go, 100 volcanoes on the cusp of eruption. And you see Bible prophecy happening before our eyes. We see experts warning of it. We see mystic rabbis, Jewish rabbis, warning of it, and the omens that come along with the super blood moon. And so you see that we are in the last days, and it's going to be an exciting ride. It's going to be a scary ride for some, as the Bible predicts that men's hearts will fail them for fear of things coming upon them, upon the earth, in these last days. And so people who aren't reading their Bibles, who aren't expecting the wrath and destruction and the end times events to come upon them, they're going to be scared. But if you know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, you don't need to be scared. You can know that Lord's coming back soon, and rest assured that your salvation is in His hands and your eternity is in His hands, no matter what comes upon us. But you need to be ready for these such things. I'll leave it there, guys, and we're going to do a second video about Israel and the elections and the prophetic significance of it and the implications. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next video.